All right, so here I wanted to share some of the current research in the area of implicit cognition and how implicit processes might be affecting decisions. The first example is in the healthcare world, where doctors are given patient profiles, and researchers are finding that doctors will make different decisions depending on whether the patient is white or African American, for example. Now, if you ask the doctors, were they conscious of this, they will say no. So one explanation for this, again, is the idea of these implicit processes that are influencing decisions. The criminal justice system is another example. If a white person dies, the perpetrator is more likely to get a death sentence than if a black person dies, for example. And especially if it is a black perpetrator who has killed a white person compared to a white perpetrator killing a white person. Also in the courtroom, consider the case where there is some evidence presented in the trial, but the judge instructs the jury to disregard that evidence, that it's inadmissible evidence. Well, the jurors might say, "Okay, I just won't factor that into my decision-making process." But the bulk of research in this area suggests that it is quite possible that that inadmissible evidence is influencing subsequent decision-making. We have the case of hiring decisions. There have been some classic studies where researchers send out resumes that are identical except the names on the resume, and some names are characteristically sort of white names or minority names or something of that nature, and they find that some resumes get more callbacks. The ones that are, for example, have white-sounding names as opposed to African-American names or Muslim names or something like that. An interesting case here with respect to orchestras in cities all across America. For a long time, the members of the orchestra were predominantly male. And it raised a question about why that was. So in some places, they began to do blind auditions, where the prospective member would give an audition, but the judges could not determine whether the individual was male or female. And sure enough, after the implementation of blind auditions, the number of women began to increase in orchestras in various cities around the country. So the implication is that prior to the blind auditions, there was a biased selection process happening. And again, if you asked the judges, they might consciously, explicitly say, no, they weren't being biased. But after blind auditions are implemented, with more women being selected, it suggests that the previous situation was one where bias was present. Consumer behavior. Here's a fun little study where researchers went to a wine store and put up displays with either French wine or German wine and of comparable cost and quality. And then they would have the store either playing French music or German music on different days. And they would just sort of tally up the sales on the days when the French music was playing and the days when the German music was playing. And what they found is that when French music was playing, more people bought French wine. When German music was playing, more people bought the German wine, right? So you get the spikes in sales for the matching wine, the wine that matches the music. Now, as part of the experiment, the sales people were asked to ask the customers when they were purchasing the wine, did they notice the music, and did the music have any role in their decision? And maybe not surprisingly, the people said, well, yeah, they heard the music, but that it had no impact on their purchasing decision, right? But so while each individual will claim that that the music did not have any impact on their purchasing decision, in order to explain the pattern of purchases, we have to hypothesize that the music was having an impact. So again, people can be conscious of the music, but what they're unconscious of is the effect that the music is having on their decision. Another example, voting decisions. So if there is a ballot measure for maybe to float a bond for schools, to build some new schools or repair them, when the voting booth is in a school, you get increases in support for the funding for schools compared to when the voting booth is in a church or some other community center or in a senior center or something. And other researchers have found that just facial perception, the perception of the candidate's face, are related to the judgment of competence. So some faces people judge to be more competent looking than others. And if you just put two politicians' faces in front of people, and these are politicians running for the same office, but the subjects don't know them, right? They're just simply asked to judge how competent looking they are. There's a high correlation between those faces that are judged to be most competent and the electoral winner of that race. And it suggests that perhaps, just the appearance of somebody might be influencing voting decisions. Now, this is not enough to establish that outright, but it raises the possibility. Certainly people would want to say that they don't pick politicians just on their looks, but it raises the possibility that it may be one factor operating possibly beneath awareness of the individual. So how can we think about this using our model? Let's take the wine purchasing study. So if we just go back to our flow chart, so the customers are in the store and they are seeing wine, they're hearing the music, right? And then they're picking up the bottle and they're having some conscious experience of the different wines they're looking at, and they may be hearing the music and so on. And then they're going to be making a decision, right? The frontal lobe systems accessing what kinds of wines they like. Maybe they have some information about different types of wine that they're going to access from long-term memory, right? And so we're going to be accessing information from long-term memory that is consistent with the different kind of values we might place on things, on these different wines, and the person makes a decision. Now, they hear the music, but they claim that the music didn't have an impact on the ultimate decision. But what the aggregate data suggests is the music it was just having an impact in an unconscious way. So here's an example where the subject can be conscious of the stimuli, they can be conscious of the music, but what they're unconscious of is the impact that the music is having on the decision-making process. And this is characteristic of a lot of contemporary research. In the old days, people were doing studies where you flash subliminal stimuli and see if it has any impact on behavior. Nowadays, a lot of the experiments involve stimuli that is conscious to the subject, but they then are unaware of the influence that stimulus has on their subsequent behavior.